You know, it's stories like this that really just make me sad. This is from VOX, and it's titled, Democrats and Republicans are both running on identity politics. A slate of historically diverse candidates versus fear-based white identity politics defines the 2018 midterm. I don't completely agree with that, but I'm not an overly political person. And as much as look, I have a lot of people who are commenting saying, like, Tim, you've made your own bed, and things of that nature, because no matter what the left seems to do, I still call myself, left and social liberal, and still advocate for certain politicians that are on the left. But I can explain this, right? My principles and values are not tied to these people. I'm not going to say that I am a social liberal because some politician is. I am not going to defend certain ideals because some politician does. I will say this is what I believe and why, based off information I've read and what I believe to be the best course of action. And I don't care who agrees with me or not. I will vote for someone who I believe is the closest to embodying what I feel is the right thing to do. And that's all I can do. And because of this, it's social liberals. However, there is nothing stopping me, and I actually feel I have a moral obligation to punch left as much as I can. And this is why a lot of people on the left don't like me, because I call them out. But you know what? This is you can't identify, think about it this way. When someone is training with punching cinder blocks, right, in martial arts, it hurts. It sucks. The cinder blocks break and you hurt your hand. But over time, your hand becomes stronger because that's how training works. When you are training for a sporting event, you have someone say, hey, this is what you are doing wrong, right? It's like coaching. And that benefits you. This is what blows my mind, is that the average person, be it left or right, can't recognize that criticism is actually strengthening if you're willing to adapt and accept where your faults are. ContraPoints, right? ContraPoints is an amazing YouTuber. I watch her stuff. She put out another one put out a video on aesthetics where she talks about trans issues and how politics works, and I'm like, it's brilliant. She frames this faux debate between her and this tabby who's an Antifa, and they talk about their opinions and ideologies, and they debate each other, and I'm like, this is great because it's a way that you can actually show people on the left why what Antifa does is wrong, but also show Antifa's opinions, because unfortunately many of these people, like Antifa's not going to do an interview sometimes, they're not going to have this in-depth conversation, and she frames it really well. But she talks about how appearance is everything. But you know what, actually, I was just going to talk about something else, and I decided, jump cut, let's just go into this article and try and stick to this before I go off on a tangent and don't actually end up even reading the article, because that's what I kind of tend to do sometimes. So this says, Democrats, like it or not, are running on identity politics in the 2018 midterms. Come to think of it, so are Republicans. A divisive 2016 Democratic primary, the party fiercely debated whether to emphasize issues important to people of color, whether to focus on progressive economic policies. The party is still figuring out how far left to take its economic agenda, but Democrats have become united on the question of diversity. So one of the challenges I have with people on the left is that I do feel that a lot of people are lying. Bernie Sanders in the debate said something like white people don't know what it's like to be poor and things of that nature, and I felt that was wrong. And I know Bernie is smarter than that, much smarter than that, and I was shocked to hear him make that statement. To me, it sounded like he was trying to pander to many people on the left, because, well, of course white people know what it means to be poor and ostracized and live in ghettos and to go without. We have stories nonstop. There's a story, it's interesting because there's a story about a man he couldn't afford his insulin payments, so he ended up dying. He was a white man. Of course he knew what it was like to be poor. He died because he couldn't afford his medicine. This story is used by people on the far left, not necessarily the far left, but like progressives and Democrats, to advocate for socialized healthcare, of which Bernie Sanders supports. But Bernie Sanders would also then claim white people don't know what it's like. So that's why I feel like nobody gets all of my trust, not even Bernie Sanders. Absolutely not. But I do believe in a lot of the things he does stand for, and so I have to recognize that. No matter who I vote for, I'm going to be upset. But at least he's as close as I can get. And, it is what it is. So let's continue on. More Democratic women have been nominated in 2018 than ever before. The party is also embracing young and progressive emerging stars like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York and Andrew Gillum in Florida, who back progressive policies such as Medicare for All. Democrats have nominated candidates likely to become the first Muslim women and the first Native American woman in Congress. They also count among their ranks some more long-shot candidates who are historic firsts in their own right. The first transgender woman nominee for governor is a Democrat in Vermont. Now, Vermont is a very small monocultural place, and things like this, I believe, are easier to accomplish, right? I believe Bernie Sanders is Vermont, I think, right? And it's easy to institute a lot of those policies when you have a smaller community and they kind of believe a lot of the same things. They'll vote in the same direction. So I want to go straight to Ocasio-Cortez in this because, in my opinion, I view her as kind of like the inversion of Trump, okay? Trump, to a lot of people, was an outsider. He spoke off the cuff. He wasn't part of this cabal of like political class individuals and things of that nature. He also lit up a bunch of areas that have never voted before. That's how he ended up winning, at least by some accounts. He also has a bunch of silly statements that have made him look silly that a lot of people have misconstrued, but Trump has said some things like relatively often that should have been correct. Now, Trump supporters have that famous phrase. They take him seriously, but not literally. They understand that when he says something, they don't believe he's literally calling for something. And people on the left take him literally, but not seriously. They think what he's saying is absolutely 100% definitive in the worst possible way and don't believe he's even serious about it. So with Cortez, you have a lot of gaffes, which is different to what Trump has done. But she hasn't been elected yet, I want to point out. But in a lot of ways, she is like Trump. She lit up areas that hadn't voted before. The polls were stacked against her. She's a departure from the traditional politics of her party. And then she ended up winning the primary. We'll see if she wins. It'll be really interesting, but let's see what they have to say. It's not an accident that Ocasio-Cortez has emerged as the face of the new Democratic Party in 2018. She's a 28-year-old Hispanic woman and identifies as a democratic socialist. She memorably introduced herself to voters with a viral video focused on her unique biography. Democrats are nominating younger, more diverse candidates, and their voters are pushing the party to the left. That might explain why Ocasio-Cortez has so quickly become one of the party's standard bearers in the national press and why, though she is facing an unusual amount of scrutiny, party leaders have been careful to extend a welcome to her. Nancy Pelosi, in a call to Ocasio-Cortez after she defeated establishment leader Joe Crowley, said, "Thank you for your courage to run. This is not for the faint of heart." Oh, hell no. And I'm surprised they haven't dug up more on Cortez and just really gone after her because, I mean, some of this, like look at Brett Kavanaugh, right? 36 years ago. I guess it's a benefit that she's young. The energy that typified Cortez's upset of a longtime Democratic political boss caught on in the races across the country. Beto O'Rourke, facing Ted Cruz in the Texas Senate race, has been buoyed by record amounts of small dollar fundraising. Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee, beat out candidates with better name recognition and more money through the enthusiasm of black voters and his association with Bernie Sanders' progressive agenda. I also want to point out, I made a video yesterday showing that Bernie Sanders polls the highest against Trump. I don't trust any of these polls. I really don't, So, I want to talk about identity politics. This is what bums me out, right? I was kind of talking about this in the beginning, that I don't think Republicans necessarily are campaigning on identity politics like they're saying. They're saying it's like fear-based white reaction to diversity. That is true to an extent, 100%. Like, I have spoken with people who are racist white people who are like, things are changing in a way I don't like, And the Democrats are bringing about more diverse candidates, but there is a fear of authoritarianism. And this is what I don't understand why it's so hard for people to understand. And perhaps there are people on the left who understand it and just don't care because they're authoritarian and they support these things. But my biggest concerns with the left, with Cortez banned the press from from two of her events. That scares me. I don't want to vote for a politician who's going to say the press isn't welcome at a public event. At the same time, I recognize politicians have private, donor-only events. I don't like that either. But I'm not going to say two wrongs make a right, and now I'm going to vote for someone who doubles down and says no press at all. When politicians say we're not going to allow press, we're having a private event, I say I don't like that. Politicians are liars. When you then have someone like Cortez saying, you know what, we're going to do kind of the same thing. It's open to the public, except not you. I'm like, you just made the problem worse. Okay. If someone like Cortez, she's not old enough to run for president. If I lived in her district, I wouldn't vote for her. I wouldn't vote for Crowley either. If she was running for president, if she does run, I wouldn't vote for her because she's banned the press. That is a huge violation of, it's a fundamental liberty. You can't have democracy without a press informing the people of what is actually going on. We have too many activist and propaganda outlets. I don't think VOX is too far off. I think they're relatively decent, definitely hyper-partisan. They're not the worst offender, like Occupy Democrats, right? Daily Kos, there's way further left, like really bad outlets. But VOX isn't the worst, and that's why I'm willing to read them and hear what they have to say, because I think it's really important. VOX comes off as like to the left of me, but typically I'm kind of okay with their stuff. So they talk about how the gender gap is wider among younger voters than older voters, and this is one thing that's really, really interesting, is that from 18 to 34, look at that. This is incredible. Women are not millennial women are not Republicans, they are Democrats. Look at that gap, that's ridiculous. And then you have an inversion, I'm sorry, it's the same. Even, all throughout, women tend to be Democrats and men tend to be Republicans. Look at this. Millennial men, the gender gap is wider among younger voters than older voters. Men, percentage of all men voting, all women voting. I don't understand what they're trying to say with this. This is actually confusing. Oh, God, I'm an idiot. I understand it. Okay, so there are more male Republicans than Democrat. There are more women Democrats than Republican. And across the board, men, there are more Republicans. And across the board for women, more Democrats. Dare I say it? A lot of this election really is a split between men versus women, males versus females, etc. So whether or not, I think it's fair to say that at the core of everything going on in this country is identity politics, straight up. And that bums me out, really does. Because I once believed in the idea that we would judge people based on the content of their character and not the color of their skin, but I guess we can't. I guess we really have entered this world, and here we are. We can see that, according to this, they're saying that among validated voters in 2016, wide gap among whites by education. Percentage of validated voters in 2016 who reported voting for. We can see that among black voters, 91% for Clinton, 6% for Trump. Trump wins among white men. White women, white women actually did swing in favor of Trump. That's really interesting. Then you have, white non-college graduates overwhelmingly for Trump. That's really interesting. And you know what I'm going to rabble too long on this article, so I'm going to cut it short. But I want to point out that Republicans from Bush to Trump and the way they speak is ridiculed in the media. If you ridicule Trump for the way he speaks, I assure you, non-college grad white people will vote for him. Non-college graduate people of many types will probably vote for him. Look at this. Among non-college grads across the board, he had more. He had, 50%. The reason for that, even among non-white, non-college grads, he actually had a little bit less. But they definitely swung in favor of Democrats. So there is an identity politic issue here. Absolutely. This is what's really crazy and scary, because I feel like the only actual outcome is going to be an increase in the alt-right. When you look at how non-whites are voting strictly Democrat for the most part, and you look at whites, I should say non-whites are voting mostly Democrat, whites are voting mostly Republican, we really do have a divide between white people and non-white people. And I can only imagine things are going to get really bad before they get better. This kind of stuff makes me not as hopeful for the future. But the last point I want to go back to about Trump is that if you insult the way he speaks, you're insulting the way poor people and uneducated people speak. There was one instance where Trump ordered a well-done steak with ketchup, and they made fun of him for it. And I'm like, that's how I used to eat steak growing up, because we could only afford poor garbage steaks. And so we'd cook them well done, and we'd slop ketchup all over it. We weren't rich, we were upper lower class, lower middle class, so we did what we could. And when I see that stuff, it reeks of this like bourgeois elitism of the wealthy people mocking the poor for the food they have to eat. And that, I believe, will result in people saying, you know what, that's the guy I want. Screw you. And like Michael Moore said, they'll give the biggest middle finger to the establishment they can think of. And they voted for Trump. Anyway, I got one more video coming up in just a few minutes. Stick around.